We're from a technology advisor to India's Prime Minister. The discussion also includes China's relationship to India. From the Daily Beast Conference last month in New Orleans, this is an hour 15 minutes.
Okay, we're going to get started on the next session. If you all will take your seats. Very good. Thank you very much. I want to start with an announcement. Neither Sam nor I are running for the presidency, so if there's anybody out there who is really screaming with rage, don't direct it at us, okay? Sam Pitroda, we are very privileged to have him here. There's a characteristic to innovation that I think is wrapped up in the story of Sam and what he has done with his life. The first part is that so much innovation really only happens when a truly innovative person gets the idea and follows through on it. And then the second chapter of innovation is that it affects whole groups of people, indeed whole nations. And that's kind of the Sam Pitroda story, if you will. He grew up in a small village in India. He ended up as an advisor to Rajiv Gandhi when he was prime minister, and literally wired the Indian nation. And that is sort of chapter one. Chapter two is what he's now in the midst of doing. In fact, he's leaving for New Delhi again. I think it's on Monday, isn't it? So Sam, why don't we start by just telling them the 1980s chapter of this remarkable story of wiring a whole nation, and not only the technical part, which is the wiring, but what it does for a country and its people.
Well, in 1980, I had sold a company that I had in Chicago to Rockwell International, and I decided to go visit India after having made a little bit of money. I had never been to Delhi. Went to Delhi, tried to call my wife from a five-star hotel, and couldn't make a call to Chicago. So little bit of arrogance and lot of ignorance said, I'm going to fix this damn thing. So then I decided to commute back and forth for several years, trying to convince government that we need to focus on IT and telecom for nation building. I was convinced that information communication technology brings about openness, accessibility, connectivity, networking, democratization, decentralization, and as a result, social transformation. Based on my own background, I was also convinced that technology is a great social leveler, second only to death. I believe technology can be an entry point to bring about generational change. So I got a chance to meet Mrs. Gandhi then, she was Prime Minister, and I told her that we need to focus on IT because we have a lot of young talent. You got to worry about rural India, access, sustainability, so indigenous development, your own design of digital switch, not rely on multinationals. And at the end she said, what do you want? So I said, give me 500 engineers in 3 years. I got 500 engineers, average age of 23, and we built all the products that India would need to wire rural India, urban India. So we built fiber optics factories, digital switches, software, and trained almost 30,000 people. That started the whole new revolution. And then Mrs. Gandhi died, Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister. And ultimately, I decided to go back to India, change my nationality back from US to Indian, and then spent about a decade working on all aspects of telecom, IT, software. I remember Jack Welch coming to India. He wanted to meet Prime Minister. Prime Minister was busy. So Prime Minister called me and said, Sam, can you handle Jack? So Jack and I had a breakfast. We had never met before, and Jack said, look, I'm here to sell engines. And I said, Jack, I'm not buying engines. I want to sell you software. So he said, I'm not buying software. So then he said, what do we do? I said, well, just have breakfast, I guess. Finally, he let me tell him a little bit about software. And he said, what do you want? I said, give me a $10 million order. This was the time when Infosys had 5 people. Wipro had 8 people. Jack gave us $10 million order. I picked up phone and called IBM. And that's how software industry got started in India. So all kinds of interesting stories. But we had great time in 80s. I was convinced that IT will change India. The democratization of information is the key to strengthening Indian democracy.
Give the audience a sense of the scale of what we're talking about. When you started, there were how many phones per head of population? And when you got through...
Interesting.
It is.
In 1981, we had 2 million telephones for 800 million people, roughly. It used to take 15 years to get a telephone connection. If you got a connection, half of the time you got dial tone, half of the time you had to wait. It used to take great deal of bribe, connections to get a telephone connection. I had a friend who went from US to India, wanted to get married, and he decided he's going to marry a girl who has a telephone connection. Today, we have 700 million mobile phones. We are adding 10 to 15 million a month, month after month, new connections. In next 24 months, we will probably have 900 million mobile phones. For the first time, a country of billion people is connected. We are a nation of connected billion. So we need to think differently. 10 years ago, we were a nation of a billion unconnected. So how do you strategize for the future with this connectivity? So my job now is to really look at public information infrastructure.
Let me come back to that. That's chapter 2, and I want to first wrap up chapter 1. There is, at first glance, when listening to you, it sounds, hey, this is not so difficult to wire up 900 billion people and so on. There were all sorts of obstacles that you had to overcome, some of which are sociological, some of which are venal, some of which are infrastructure and so on. Go over some of the things you had to do to get to where India now is.
First of all, I had to decide that I want to build a nation and not build a business. So I had to give up everything. I took 1 rupee salary for 11 years. I spent lots of money going back and forth. I had to take Gandhian approach. Sense of sacrifice, love for everybody, simplicity, openness, transparency. There were stories in India that CIA has planted a man in Prime Minister's office. That was me. So, you had to be very careful that you are working with a system that doesn't expect outside intervention to change it overnight. I had to give up my nationality. It was pretty painful, but it had to be done. I had young children, born and raised in Chicago. I had parents in Chicago, so I had to move my family, left my parents there. So at personal level, it was pretty tough. At political level, I had all the support from the Prime Minister. So I believe political will was very important. Without political will, I wouldn't have done what I could do. And then the real support came from young talent. As you know, in India, we have 550 million young below age of 25. We essentially need to build their future, their prosperity, jobs, growth, education. That's the main challenge today. So it was tough.
And there were systemic problems, the federated nature of government, the level of corruption. Lots of people benefited from the system the way it was, and you had to get over all of that. Now, Chapter 2, which is what you're engaged on now, is even more pervasive and impressive than Chapter 1. Explain wiring the country for all information and the use of clouds as the kind of the generating mechanism.
Well, for last 5 years, I have been working on Knowledge Commission. As a chairman of India's Knowledge Commission, along with about 7 of my colleagues, we looked at 5 aspects of knowledge. Access to knowledge, which include languages, translation, libraries, portals, broadband, affirmative action programs, reservations, quotas, all concepts, school education, higher education, distance learning, vocational education. We also looked at creation of knowledge, patents, copyright, trademark, innovation, entrepreneurship, use of knowledge in agriculture, health, small and medium-scale industries, and e-governance. About 27 different subjects. We spent 5 years preparing a roadmap for next 20 years. It's all on the web. If you go to www.knowledgecommission.gov.in, you will see hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents on recommendations to the Prime Minister. For the last year, I am focused on building 6 different platforms to this predominantly connected country. I want to build a broadband platform for 100 megabit bandwidth, wiring all our universities, all libraries, all R&D institutions. It's going to cost at least 3 to 5 billion. Government has already approved. It's underway. 1,500 points will be wired with 40 gigabit. Then we want to create ID platform, universal ID, that colleague of mine, Nandan Nilekani, former head of Infosys, is working on, where all billion people will have ID with face, fingerprints, and iris. Then we want to create security infrastructure, GIS, applications, payment. These are the 6 platforms that we need to create. To do this, we need to connect 250,000 panchayats, which are local governments, to 100 megabit bandwidth. We have 800,000 kilometers of fiber already underground. It's all dark fiber, most of it. So we are using that fiber with railways, gas authority, telephone companies to wire up all local governments to improve education. Like last night, there was a discussion on education. What was really missing was the role of technology. We don't learn the same way I learned 50 years ago. Teacher does not need to create content. Teacher does not need to deliver content. Today, most of the time, 90% of the time, teacher creates contents and deliver content. So the role of the teacher will change to that of a mentor. So how do you define new teacher? So we are looking at a lot of these things in light of what technology can do. Without technology, we cannot meet our aspirations. We don't have enough teachers, don't have enough buildings, enough doctors. Everything that we plan to do in the next 10, 20 years is going to be based on IT.
You mentioned the, the session yesterday on education. One of the points made during that session was that within the craft or profession, what you want to call it, there is a built-in resistance to change. It can be overcome to some extent. What you are proposing is even more radical than what we were talking about for America. What is the situation in terms of both the public, the government, and the educational establishment as far as change of that dimension in how you educate Indians?
Like here, we also have teachers' unions. We also have a lot of lobbies. And we also get lots and lots of resistance. Our job is to go out to public, talk, because it is still a democracy, openly promote our ideas, and carry young people with us. In many of these areas, we really have virgin territory. We have greenfield situation. We don't have a lot of vested interests. I'll give you one example. In US, we have 1,200 data centers for government. Everybody and his brother came up with a data center. In India, we plan to build 4 because we are starting in 2010 as opposed to 1980. So we have sort of an advantage to leapfrog mainly because we are doing it now. So we are counting on that and we keep fighting the battle every day. You know.
The session we have coming up after this is on India and China. Now, you're obviously taking some radically different approaches to the use of technology and the use of information because of such different political systems. How would you characterize, if I can put it this way, the competition between these two great and very large countries and the roads they're on and what your prospects for them are?
Well, I don't see it as a competition. You know, they have billion people to serve, we have billion people to serve. We have a democracy. So we are going to focus on democratizing information. We're going to focus on open government. We're going to focus on technology to deliver public services, education, health. We have very serious problems of our own. Disparity between rich and poor, urban, rural, educated, uneducated. Demography, 550 million young below age of 25. Development, we are doing everything, but we are not doing fast enough. We need more of all of it. So our pattern is going to be different, it's going to be slow compared to China. Like in Shanghai, they wanted to build the road going from airport to the city. Somebody probably drew a line and said, that's the road. And then you bulldoze everybody. In India, you can't do that. You got to go through like this. But that's the price you pay for democracy. And we are happy to do that.
We described a bit the scale of transformation that comes when you wire a whole country for mobile telephones. What we didn't do, and maybe we could do just an example or two so people can get an idea of how does it actually change life. In rural India today, what is primarily fundamentally different now that you have telephone communication where you didn't have any of any kind before?
It's interesting. First of all, people can pick up phone and call their member of parliament and scream. And they think that's great. Wake him up at midnight. You know, ask for help to take somebody to hospital, get admission for my kid, you know, ask for all kinds of things. 2, they get a lot of information about their job, weather forecasting, information on seeds, pricing for their goods and services. If I have lots of tomatoes to sell, I make a lot of calls and find out where to sell. So I think communication has opened their horizon. We still have 19th century mindset, 20th century processes, and 21st century needs. But when little kid in a village can get in front of a screen and go visit Guggenheim Museum, it changes his perception. Compared to when I came to America in 1964, I had never made a telephone call in my life. I had a master's in physics. I had never seen television. I knew how to design one, but I had never seen one. Compared to that, kids today see the world day in, day out. So their aspirations are very different. The reflexes are very different. So I think technology has given us a new roadmap to build a nation. We are all very excited about it. We think next 25 years are going to be very critical for India. We have a window of opportunity for next 5-7 years to put all of these things in place. And that's all, someone like me at my age can do.
This is a little off the subject we've been discussing right now, but we have a sort of unique situation here. You are an Indian and also with a long American heritage. We have a president about to go to India on what is a more consequential trip than usual, we tend to think. What are some of your thoughts about what ought to happen on this trip, and particularly in your area of modernization and development? What would you like to see come up?
Well, there are a lot of expectations about this trip. Everyone believes that the oldest and the biggest democracies coming together would mean a lot to the rest of the world. We have signed a nuclear treaty. We need lots of energy. We believe in open government. And I believe this visit of the President Obama is being watched by the rest of the leaders in the world as an important event. And I hope we can send the right signals to the world that we want to build a different kind of a world together. I think US needs India and India needs US more so than ever before. Earlier, US looked down on India for a long time. There are all kinds of stories about how Mrs. Gandhi and Reagan got along. I think it's about time to look in your eyes at the same level with respect and begin a whole new chapter. Lot of hope. He's going to be spending 2 days in Mumbai, I'm told, and a day in Delhi. We're trying to see if we can work out some programs on open government and send signals to the world that we want to democratize information together.
Sam, that is a very good note in which to transfer ourselves.
If you just give me 1 minute, I
Excuse
think we
me,
forgot to talk about innovation.
Yeah.
We have set up in India a National Innovation Council to look at 5 aspects of innovations. 1, innovation as a platform. So it's not about products and services and technology and high tech and science and laboratories. It's more about innovations in government, social sector, families, and look at innovation as a platform. 2, innovations for inclusive growth. We believe, especially I believe, best brains in the world have been solving problems of the rich who really don't have problems to solve. As a result, problems of the poor don't get the right kind of talent. We want to get the best brains solving problems of the poor because we have lots of poor and world is looking to us with our talent to solve the problems of the poor in the world. 3, we want to create new ecosystem for innovation. We want to define new drivers. For example, disposable versus durable. We want to create discourse on innovation. So we are really working on lots of interesting things to make sure that innovation comes out of the labs into the minds of the people. Again, it's going to take a decade, but the process is on.
Thank you so much. It's really quite a story. And it's a privilege to have you here.
Thanks.